The morning sun crept through the thin curtains of the small apartment, but Maria felt no warmth from its rays. She sat at the tiny kitchen table, staring at a pile of bills that seemed to grow larger each day. Her hands shook as she counted the money in her worn wallet for the third time that morning. $17. That was all that stood between her family and complete disaster. 3 months had passed since the accident that took her husband away forever. David had been working on a construction site when the scaffolding collapsed. One moment he was alive, calling her during his lunch break to ask what she wanted for dinner. The next moment, her whole world fell apart with a single phone call from the hospital. Maria closed her eyes and tried to push away the memory of that terrible day. The doctors had done everything they could, but David's injuries were too severe. She remembered holding his hand as he took his last breath, promising him that she would take care of their children no matter what. But keeping that promise was turning out to be much harder than she ever imagined. The insurance company was still fighting the claim, saying they needed more paperwork and more time to investigate. Meanwhile, the bills kept coming. The rent was due in 5 days, and she was already 2 weeks behind. The electricity company had sent a final notice. The phone service would be cut off next week if she didn't pay. Maria looked around the small apartment that had once felt like home, but now felt like a prison. The refrigerator hummed loudly because the seal was broken, but she couldn't afford to fix it. The carpet was stained and worn, but new carpet was just a dream. The walls needed paint, but paint cost money she didn't have. In the bedroom, she shared with baby Rico, her youngest child was still sleeping peacefully. At 18 months old, Rico didn't understand that his daddy wasn't coming home anymore. He would look toward the door every evening around 6 o'clock, the time when David used to walk through with his lunchbox and a smile that could light up the whole room. Her other 3 children were getting ready for school in the other bedroom. 12-year-old Anna was helping 7-year-old Isabella brush her hair, while 10-year-old Miguel packed his backpack with the same broken zipper he'd had for 2 years. Anna had grown up too fast since her father died. She helped with the baby, cooked simple meals when Maria was at work, and never complained even though Maria knew she missed her friends and activities. Anna had been on the school basketball team, but Maria couldn't afford the equipment anymore. She'd had to tell Anna that sports were a luxury they couldn't afford right now. Miguel had become quiet and withdrawn. He used to be full of energy and jokes just like his father. Now he barely spoke at meals and spent most of his time alone. His teacher had called to say his grades were dropping and he seemed sad all the time. Maria's heart broke a little more, each day watching her son struggle with grief while she was too busy trying to survive to give him the attention he needed. Little Isabella was the only one who still seemed like herself most of the time. She was naturally cheerful and didn't fully understand why everything had changed, but even she had started asking difficult questions. Yesterday she wanted to know why they couldn't buy the good cereal anymore, and why they always ate peanut butter sandwiches. Maria worked 25 hours a week at Thompson's grocery store, but it wasn't enough. The store owner, Mrs. Thompson, was kind and understanding, but business was slow and she couldn't offer more hours. Maria made $8 an hour, which meant she brought home about $600 a month after taxes. The rent alone was $450. She had tried to find a second job, but who would watch the children? Anna was responsible for her age, but Maria couldn't ask a 12-year-old to take care of 3 younger children, especially a baby. Childcare cost more than Maria could make at most jobs, so she was trapped in an impossible situation. The church had helped with some groceries in the first month after David died, but Maria was too proud to keep asking. She had grown up believing that people should take care of themselves and not be a burden on others. Asking for help felt like admitting she was a failure as a mother and a wife, but pride doesn't fill empty stomachs or pay electric bills. Maria opened the refrigerator and took inventory of what they had left. Half a loaf of bread, some peanut butter, 3 eggs, and a gallon of milk that would expire tomorrow. In the cabinets, she found a can of tomato soup and some crackers. That would have to last until she got paid again on Friday, which was still 3 days away. She made peanut butter sandwiches for the children's lunch boxes, cutting them into interesting shapes to make the same old food seem more exciting. Anna came into the kitchen wearing her favorite jeans, which were now too short for her growing legs. "Mama, do we have any money for lunch today?" Anna asked quietly. The school lunch program cost $2.50 per child, which seemed like nothing to most families but was a fortune when you only had $17 to your name. Take your sandwich, honey, Maria said, trying to keep her voice cheerful. I made it just the way you like it. Anna nodded and didn't complain, but Maria saw the disappointment in her eyes. All the other kids bought lunch from the cafeteria, and Anna was embarrassed to always bring sandwiches from home. Miguel and Isabella came into the kitchen together. Miguel had dark circles under his eyes because he'd been having nightmares about his father. Isabella was humming a song she'd learned at school, seemingly unaware of the tension in the room. Can we have juice with breakfast? Isabella asked, climbing onto her chair at the table. We're out of juice, baby, Maria said, pouring water into plastic cups. But water is better for you anyway. It helps you grow big and strong. Isabella accepted this explanation the way children do, but Maria felt like she was failing her daughter. David would have made sure his children had juice and good food and everything they needed. He had worked so hard to provide for his family, sometimes taking extra shifts to make sure they could afford little luxuries like juice and new clothes. After the children left for school, Maria sat in the quiet apartment with baby Rico, trying to figure out how to make $17 stretch until Friday. She could buy rice and beans, which would fill their stomachs but wouldn't provide much nutrition. She could skip lunch herself and make sure the children had enough to eat. She had already lost 15 pounds since David died, partly from grief, and partly from not eating enough. Rico woke up and started crying for his morning bottle. Maria prepared it with powdered formula, carefully measuring to make the can last as long as possible. As Rico drank his bottle, he looked up at her with David's dark eyes, and Maria felt the familiar ache in her chest. The baby formula was expensive, and she was almost out. Rico needed special formula because regular milk upset his stomach. The special kind cost twice as much as regular formula, and Maria didn't know how she would afford to buy more. She walked to the window and looked out at the busy street below. People hurried past on their way to work, carrying coffee cups and talking on their phones. They looked like they belonged to a different world, a world where morning coffee was a routine expense instead of an impossible luxury. Maria had always considered herself strong. She had worked since she was 16, saved money for their wedding, helped David build their life together step by step. But now she felt like she was drowning, and every day the water got deeper. That afternoon, while Rico napped, Maria sat at the table and tried to make a plan. She had applied for government assistance, but the paperwork was complicated, and the waiting list was long. She had looked for better jobs, but most of them required experience she didn't have, or education she couldn't afford to get. She thought about calling her sister in another state, but Linda had her own problems, and 3 children of her own. Maria's parents had died in a car accident years ago, and David's parents lived in Mexico and barely had enough money to take care of themselves. When the children came home from school, Isabella ran to her with a piece of paper covered in colorful drawings. Look what I made for you, Mama, Isabella said proudly. It's our family and we're all happy. The drawing showed stick figures holding hands under a big yellow sun. Isabella had drawn herself, Anna, Miguel, baby Rico, and Maria all smiling. She had also drawn a figure in the clouds that was obviously meant to be David watching over them. It's beautiful, baby, Maria said, hugging her daughter tight. We'll put it on the refrigerator so everyone can see it. But as she looked at the happy family in the drawing, Maria felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. How could she keep her children safe and fed and happy when she could barely afford to keep the lights on? That evening, as she tucked Isabella into bed, her youngest daughter asked, Mama, why do we always eat peanut butter for dinner now? Maria's heart broke a little more. She sat on the edge of the bed and smoothed Isabella's hair. Sometimes families have to be creative with their meals, she said softly. Peanut butter is good for you. It has protein to help you grow. But I miss having different foods like we used to, Isabella said. Remember when Daddy would bring home pizza sometimes, and we had that big turkey at Thanksgiving? I remember. Sweetheart, Maria said, fighting back tears. Maybe someday we'll have those things again. After Isabella fell asleep, Maria woke up before dawn, her stomach churning with a mixture of hunger and anxiety. Today was the day she would carry her sign to the intersection and ask strangers for work. She had barely slept, tossing and turning all night while imagining the looks people would give her. Would they judge her? Would they think she was lazy or irresponsible? She got dressed quietly, choosing her cleanest shirt and her only pair of jeans without holes. If she was going to ask for work, she wanted to look presentable and capable. She brushed her hair and tried to cover the dark circles under her eyes with the last bit of makeup she owned. Baby Rico was still sleeping peacefully in his crib. Maria had planned to wake him early and take him with her to the intersection. But when she went to check on him, her heart sank. His little forehead was burning hot with fever and his breathing sounded congested. "Oh no, baby," she whispered, picking him up gently. Rico opened his eyes and looked at her with a glassy, unfocused stare that told her he was really sick. His body felt limp and warm against her chest. Maria's plans crumbled in an instant. She couldn't take a sick baby out in the cool morning air to stand on a street corner for hours. But she also couldn't leave him with Anna, who was only 12 years old and had never taken care of a seriously ill child. She gave Rico some baby medicine to bring down his fever and tried to get him to drink a bottle. But he only took a few sips before turning his head away. Maria paced the small apartment, holding her sick son and fighting back tears of frustration and worry. The older children got ready for school as usual, and Anna noticed that Rico seemed different. "Is the baby okay, Mama?" Anna asked, gently touching Rico's hot cheek. "He has a fever," Maria said, trying to sound calm. "I need to stay home with him today to make sure he gets better." Anna nodded seriously. Even at 12, she understood that someone had to take care of Rico. She helped Miguel and Isabella get their backpacks and lunchboxes ready, acting like a little mother herself. "Don't worry, Mama," Anna said as they headed for the door. "Rico will be better soon." After the children left for school, Maria settled into the rocking chair with Rico, feeling defeated before the day had even begun. The cardboard sign leaned against the front door like a reminder of her desperation, but she couldn't use it today. Rico needed her more than her pride needed to be preserved. She spent the morning trying to get Rico to drink fluids and rest. Every few minutes she would check his temperature, hoping it would start to come down. The baby medicine seemed to help a little, but Rico was still fussy and uncomfortable. Around noon, Maria heard the sound of a truck pulling into the driveway outside her apartment building. She looked out the window and saw an older pickup truck, dusty from farm work and loaded with hay bales in the back. A man got out of the driver's seat and looked toward her building. Maria didn't recognize him at first, but as he walked closer, she realized she had seen him at Thompson's grocery store where she worked. He was tall and weathered, probably in his late 50s with gray hair under a well-worn cowboy hat. His clothes were clean but simple work clothes, and he moved with the steady pace of someone used to physical labor. The man walked up to her door and knocked gently. Maria's heart started racing. Nobody ever came to visit anymore, not since David died. Most of their old friends had drifted away, not knowing what to say or how to help. Maria opened the door but kept the screen door locked between them. Through the screen, she could see that the man had kind eyes and a gentle expression. "Ma'am," he said, taking off his hat politely. "My name is Robert Johnson. I think I've seen you at Thompson's store where you work." "Yes," Maria said carefully, shifting Rico to her other arm. "I'm Maria. Is there something you need?" Robert glanced down at the cardboard sign that was still leaning against the doorframe, and his expression grew more serious. "Well, ma'am, I've been hearing around town about your situation," he said quietly. "People talk in a small town, and I know you've been having a hard time since your husband passed. I'm real sorry for your loss." Maria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had hoped her struggles weren't obvious to everyone, but apparently the whole town knew about her problems. "I saw your sign there," Robert continued, nodding toward the cardboard. "And I was wondering if you might be interested in some work. I've got a ranch about 10 miles outside of town, and I could really use help with my bookkeeping and office work." Maria stared at him in surprise. She had expected judgment or pity, but instead this stranger was offering her exactly what she had planned to ask for. "I don't know much about ranch work," she said honestly. "This wouldn't be ranch work exactly," Robert explained. "More like office work. I've got piles of invoices and receipts that need organizing, tax papers that are a mess, and a computer system I can barely figure out. I've been putting it off for months because I hate paperwork." Robert shifted his weight and seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "The thing is, I could pay you $15 an hour for about 20 hours a week to start. And if you need to bring your children with you, that would be fine. The ranch is safe, and there's plenty of room for them to play while you work." Maria's mind raced. $15 an hour was almost twice what she made at the grocery store, and 20 hours a week would mean $300 instead of the $160 she currently made. It could change everything. But she was suspicious too. Why would a stranger offer her such a good job? What did he want in return? "Why me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." Robert was quiet for a moment, looking out across the parking lot. "I lost my wife about 5 years ago," he said finally. "Cancer. We never had children of our own, but I remember how hard it was just dealing with the grief and the bills and everything else. I can't imagine trying to do it with 4 kids depending on me." He looked back at Maria with genuine sympathy. "I guess I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning," he said. "And if I can throw someone a life preserver, well, that seems like the right thing to do." Maria felt tears starting to form in her eyes. Kindness from a stranger was almost harder to accept than the cruelty of unpaid bills and empty refrigerators. "I would need to bring the baby," she said, holding Rico a little tighter. "He's sick today, and I don't have anyone to watch him." "That's no problem at all," Robert said. "I've got a comfortable office with air conditioning, and if the little one needs to sleep, there's a quiet room right next to it." Maria looked down at Rico, who had finally fallen asleep in her arms. His fever seemed to be coming down a little, but he was still warm and needed rest. "When would you want me to start?" she asked. "Whenever you're ready," Robert said. "Tomorrow? Next week, whenever works for you. I've been putting off this paperwork for so long that a few more days won't hurt." Maria made a quick decision that surprised her with its certainty. "Could I start tomorrow?" she asked. "If Rico is feeling better?" Robert smiled, and his whole face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That would be perfect," he said. "I'll pick you up at 8 in the morning if that works. The ranch is too far to walk, and I figured you might not have transportation." It was true. Maria had sold their car 2 months ago to pay rent, and she had been walking to work or catching rides with coworkers when she could. 8 o'clock sounds good," she said. Robert put his hat back on and turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at her. "Ma'am, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I think you're doing a real good job with those kids. I see them around town sometimes, and they're polite and well-behaved. Their daddy would be proud." With that, he walked back to his truck and drove away, leaving Maria standing in the doorway with a sleeping baby and a heart full of hope for the first time in months. That evening, when the children came home from school, Maria told them about her conversation with Mr. Johnson. Anna's face lit up with excitement. "Does this mean we'll have more money for food?" Anna asked. "Yes, honey," Maria said. "It means things are going to get better." Miguel, who had been so quiet and sad lately, actually smiled. "Can we see the ranch?" he asked. "I've never been on a real ranch before." "Mr. Johnson said I can bring you with me," Maria said. "You'll have to be good and let me work, but you can explore and see the animals." Even little Isabella was excited about the prospect of seeing horses and cows and all the animals she had only seen in picture books. That night, Maria put the cardboard sign in the closet. She wouldn't need it anymore. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning, a chance to provide for her children without sacrificing her dignity. As she tucked the children into bed, Anna hugged her extra tight. "I'm proud of you, Mama," Anna said. "Daddy would be proud too." Maria kissed her daughter's forehead and felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Maybe Robert Johnson was right. Maybe she was doing a good job after all. Maybe tomorrow really would be better than today. For the first time since David died, Maria fell asleep without worrying about how she would feed her children the next day. Sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the answer to our prayers arrives in the form of a kind stranger with a pickup truck and a heart full of compassion. The next morning, Maria woke up with butterflies in her stomach. Rico's fever had broken during the night, and he seemed much better, babbling and reaching for his toys like his normal self. She dressed carefully in her nicest clothes and packed a diaper bag with everything the baby might need during the day. At exactly 8 o'clock, Robert's pickup truck pulled into the driveway. Maria gathered Rico in her small purse and walked out to meet him, her heart pounding with nervousness and excitement. "Good morning," Robert said with a warm smile. "How's the little one feeling today?" "Much better, thank you," Maria replied, climbing into the passenger seat while Robert helped secure Rico's car seat in the back. The drive to the ranch took about 15 minutes through rolling hills and farmland that Maria had never seen before. She had lived in the town all her life, but rarely ventured beyond its borders. The countryside was beautiful, with fields of corn and wheat stretching as far as she could see. "I've owned this land for about 20 years, Robert explained as they drove. "My wife and I bought it when we were young and full of dreams. We raised cattle and horses, grew some crops. It was a good life." Maria could hear the sadness in his voice when he mentioned his wife, and she understood that feeling all too well. "Do you still raise cattle?" she asked. "Some," Robert said. "Not as many as I used to. It's hard to manage everything alone, and I'm not getting any younger." They turned down a gravel road lined with wooden fence posts, and Maria got her first glimpse of Johnson Ranch. The main house was a simple but well-maintained 2-story building with a wraparound porch. Behind it stood a large red barn, several smaller outbuildings, and pastures where horses and cattle grazed peacefully. "It's beautiful," Maria said, and she meant it. The ranch felt peaceful and welcoming in a way that her cramped apartment never had. Robert parked near the house and led Maria to a small building that served as his office. Inside, Maria saw exactly what he had described. Papers were stacked everywhere, covering every surface. Filing cabinets stood open with documents spilling out. A computer sat on the desk, surrounded by sticky notes and reminders. "I know it looks bad," Robert said sheepishly. "I kept telling myself I'd get organized eventually, but eventually never came." Maria set Rico down on a blanket Robert had prepared, surrounded by some simple toys. The baby seemed content to play while she surveyed the chaos around her. "Where should I start?" she asked. "Wherever you think makes sense," Robert said. "I trust your judgment." For the next several hours, Maria sorted through invoices, receipts, and bank statements. She discovered that Robert's ranch was more successful than he had let on. He sold cattle to markets in 3 states, provided hay to smaller farms, and even boarded horses for city people who wanted to keep their animals in the country. But his record-keeping was a disaster. Important documents were mixed in with grocery, receipts, and old newspapers. Tax papers from 3 years ago were scattered among current bills. Maria could see why he needed help. As she worked, Robert checked on her periodically, bringing her water and making sure Rico was comfortable. He seemed genuinely grateful for her efforts and never made her feel like she was moving too slowly or making mistakes. Around noon, Robert knocked on the office door. "Would you like to take a break for lunch?" he asked. "I made some sandwiches." "Nothing fancy." They sat on the front porch of the house eating ham sandwiches and drinking iced tea while Rico napped in his carrier. The view from the porch was spectacular, with green pastures rolling into the distance and mountains visible on the horizon. "I can see why you love this place," Maria said. "My wife used to sit right here every evening," Robert said, looking out across the land. "She said it was the most peaceful place on earth." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts about the people they had loved and lost. That afternoon, when it was time for the children to get home from school, Robert offered to drive Maria back to town to pick them up and bring them to the ranch. "Are you sure that's not too much trouble?" Maria asked. "No trouble at all," Robert said. "I'd like to meet them." They picked up Anna, Miguel, and Isabella from school, and Maria watched nervously as her children climbed into Robert's truck. She wanted so badly for this job to work out, and she hoped her kids would behave themselves. but her worries were unnecessary. Robert talked easily with the children during the drive back to the ranch, asking about their school and their interests. Miguel, who had been so withdrawn lately, actually started talking about his favorite subject, which was science. "I like learning about animals," Miguel said, "how they live and what they eat and stuff like that." "Well, you've come to the right place," Robert said. "I've got plenty of animals here that you can observe." When they arrived at the ranch, the children's eyes went wide with wonder. Isabella had never seen a real horse up close, and she stood very still, while Robert introduced her to Bella, a gentle mare who seemed to enjoy the attention. Anna was immediately drawn to a group of calves in one of the pastures. She climbed up on the fence rail to get a better look, and Robert came over to explain how to tell the difference between bulls and cows, and how old each animal was. But it was Miguel who surprised everyone. When they walked past the chicken coop, he stopped and stared at the birds with intense curiosity. "How many chickens do you have?" he asked. "About 30, I think," Robert said. "But I'm not really sure. I don't keep very good track of them." Miguel's face lit up with an idea. "Could I count them?" he asked. "And maybe keep track of how many eggs they lay? I could make a chart." Robert looked at Maria, who nodded her approval. "I think that would be very helpful," Robert said seriously. "I could use a good chicken manager." For the rest of the afternoon, while Maria continued working in the office, the children explored the ranch under Robert's watchful supervision. He showed them how to feed the horses, how to collect eggs from the chickens, and how to identify different types of birds that nested in the barn. Isabella found a litter of barn kittens and fell instantly in love. She sat very quietly while the mother cat sniffed her hand and decided she was trustworthy enough to pet the babies. "Can we come here every day?" Isabella asked her mother when it was time to go home. "If Mr. Johnson says it's okay," Maria said. "Of course it's okay," Robert said. "I enjoyed having you here. The ranch feels more alive with children around." Over the following weeks, a routine developed that felt natural and comfortable. Robert would pick up Maria and Rico each morning, and they would collect the other children from school in the afternoon. While Maria worked in the office, slowly bringing order to years of chaos, the children found their own roles on the ranch. Miguel became the official chicken keeper, maintaining detailed records of egg production and the health of each bird. He made charts and graphs that impressed even Robert with their accuracy and thoroughness. Anna discovered a talent for working with the horses. She learned to brush them, clean their stalls, and even helped Robert with basic veterinary care. The animals seemed to trust her instinctively, and she had a gentle touch that calmed nervous horses. Isabella appointed herself as the chief kitten caretaker and barn explorer. She knew every hiding place where the cats liked to sleep, and she could identify each chicken by name and personality. Even baby Rico thrived in the ranch environment. The fresh air and open spaces seemed to agree with him, and he rarely got sick the way he had in the cramped apartment. Robert began creating small jobs for each of the children, paying them a few dollars a week for their help. Miguel earned money. For his chicken records, Anna got paid for helping with the horses, and Isabella received a small allowance for keeping the barn cats fed and watered. The children didn't realize that Robert was creating these jobs mainly to give them spending, money, and a sense of purpose. They were just proud to be contributing to the ranch and earning their own money for the first time in their lives. Maria watched her children transform before her eyes. Miguel came out of his shell and started talking enthusiastically about his chicken research. Anna smiled more and seemed to be regaining the confidence she had lost when her father died. Isabella remained her cheerful self, but now had stories to tell every day about her adventures with the animals. The ranch became more than just a workplace. It became a sanctuary where Maria's family could heal from their grief and rediscover joy. The open spaces and fresh air seemed to wash away the stress and sadness that had filled their small apartment. Robert seemed to benefit from their presence too. The lonely widower who had rattled around his empty house for years now had reason to cook bigger meals and plan activities that would interest the children. His house filled with laughter and conversation for the first time since his wife died. One evening, as Robert was driving them home, Isabella fell asleep against Anna's shoulder, exhausted from a day of playing with kittens and helping collect eggs. Thank you, Maria said quietly. Not just for the job, but for everything. You've given us our lives back. Robert was quiet for a moment, focused on the road ahead. I think you've given me mine back too, he said finally. This old place was getting pretty lonely before you folks showed up. Maria looked back at her sleeping children and baby Rico, babbling happily in his car seat. For the first time since David died, as autumn painted the ranch in shades of gold and red, the Rodriguez family had become as much a part of Johnson Ranch as the horses and cattle. 3 months had passed since that first nervous morning when Maria walked into Robert's chaotic office, and now she couldn't imagine their lives any other way. Maria had transformed the ranch's business operations completely. What had once been piles of disorganized papers were now neat filing systems with everything labeled and categorized. She had set up a computer system that tracked expenses, income, and inventory. Robert's accountant had called to say it was the most organized his books had ever been, but more than just organizing papers, Maria had brought efficiency and ideas that were helping the ranch become more profitable. She had researched new markets for Robert's cattle and found buyers who paid better prices. She had suggested starting a small farm store to sell eggs, vegetables, and preserved goods to tourists who drove through the area. I don't know how I managed without you, Robert told her one afternoon as they reviewed the monthly financial reports. My profits are up 30% since you started working here. Maria blushed at the compliment. She had always been good with numbers and organization, but David's job had provided enough income that she had never needed to use those skills professionally. Now she was discovering talents she hadn't known she possessed. The children had settled into ranch life as if they had been born to it. Miguel's chicken project had expanded into a full scientific study. He kept detailed records of which hens laid the most eggs, what foods made them healthiest, and how weather affected their behavior. Robert had helped him set up a small laboratory in one of the outbuildings where Miguel could examine eggs under a microscope and conduct experiments. That boy has the makings of a real scientist, Robert told Maria one day. Have you thought about what kind of education he might want to pursue? The question caught Maria off guard. Before David died, they had talked about their children's futures in general terms, but college had seemed like a distant dream. Now, watching Miguel's passion for research and learning, Maria began to think seriously about how to make higher education possible for her son. Anna had become Robert's right-hand assistant with the horses. She could handle even the most spirited animals with a calm confidence that amazed the adults. Robert had started teaching her about horse training, animal psychology, and basic veterinary care. Anna has a real gift, Robert explained to Maria. Some people spend years learning what comes naturally to her. She understands horses in a way that can't be taught. Anna was flourishing under Robert's guidance and attention. The sad, withdrawn girl who had tried to be the adult of the family was becoming a confident young woman with her own interests and dreams. She talked about maybe studying veterinary medicine or animal science when she got older. Isabella remained the ranch's unofficial sunshine, bringing joy and laughter wherever she went. She had memorized the names and personalities of every animal on the property, and she delighted in giving tours to the occasional visitors who stopped by to buy eggs or vegetables. This is Rosita, she would say, pointing to a red hen. She's very friendly, but she doesn't like loud noises. And this is Fernando, the rooster. He thinks he's the boss of everyone, but really the hens just let him think that. Visitors were charmed by Isabella's enthusiasm and knowledge. Several people had asked Robert if he ever gave official tours of the ranch, which had given Maria an idea for another way to bring in income. Even baby Rico was thriving in the ranch environment. At 2 years old, he was walking confidently and had learned to be gentle around the animals. He followed his older siblings everywhere, trying to copy everything they did. Robert had made him a small collection box for gathering eggs, though Rico was more likely to sit in the chicken coop and giggle at the birds than actually collect anything. The ranch house itself had come alive with the presence of children. Robert had cleaned out rooms that had been storage spaces and set them up as play areas and study spaces. The kitchen, which had been silent for years, now filled with conversation during the meals they often shared together. Robert had become much more than an employer. He helped Miguel with his homework when math got difficult. He taught Anna to drive the ranch truck in the pastures. He read bedtime stories to Isabella when they stayed late. He played peekaboo with Rico and bought him toys and books. Maria watched these interactions with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper that she wasn't ready to name. Robert was filling a role in her children's lives that had been empty since David died, not trying to replace their father, but providing the steady masculine presence that they needed to feel safe and loved. One evening in late October, they were all sitting around Robert's kitchen table after dinner when Rico started fussing and pulling at his ear. Maria recognized the signs immediately. "I think he might have an ear infection," she said, feeling Rico's forehead for fever. "The urgent care clinic in town is closed," Robert said, looking at the clock. "But there's a pediatric emergency room about an hour away in the city." "I don't have a car," Maria said, feeling the familiar panic that came with medical emergencies when you didn't have resources. "I'll drive you," Robert said without hesitation. "Let me get my keys." The drive to the emergency room felt long and stressful, with Rico crying and uncomfortable in his car seat. Anna held Isabella, who was worried about her baby brother, while Miguel sat quietly, trying to be helpful. At the hospital, Robert surprised Maria by staying with them through the entire process. He helped entertain the children in the waiting room, bought snacks from the vending machine, and even held Rico while Maria filled out paperwork. When the doctor confirmed that Rico had a severe ear infection and needed prescription antibiotics, Robert quietly handed Maria his credit card before she could worry about how to pay for the medicine. "I'll pay you back," Maria said, feeling embarrassed about accepting more help. "We're family," Robert said simply. "Family takes care of each other." The word hung in the air between them. Family. That's what they had become, though neither of them had said it out loud before. On the drive home, with Rico finally sleeping, peacefully after getting his medicine, Isabella asked the question that all the children had been thinking. "Mr. Robert, do you wish you were our daddy?" The truck got very quiet. Maria held her breath, unsure how Robert would respond to such a direct question from a 7-year-old. Robert was quiet for a long moment, his hand steady on the steering wheel. "I wish I could have met your real daddy," he said finally. "He must have been a wonderful man to have such amazing children, but I'm honored that you've let me be part of your family now." "Our daddy would have liked you," Miguel said with certainty. "He always said that good people help each other." "Yeah," Anna added, "and he would be happy that someone is taking care of Mama and helping her not be so worried all the time." Maria felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Her children were so wise, so able to love deeply while still honoring their father's memory. That night, after Robert had driven them home and helped get Rico settled with his medicine, Maria sat in her small apartment and thought about how much their lives had changed. 6 months ago, she had been desperate and hopeless, ready to stand on a street corner with a cardboard sign. Now her children were thriving. She was earning a good living doing work she enjoyed, and they had all found a place where they belonged. But more than that, she had to admit to herself that her feelings for Robert had grown beyond gratitude. She looked forward to seeing his smile each morning. She found herself thinking about him during the quiet moments. She felt safe and cared for in a way she hadn't since David died. The next morning, Robert arrived as usual to pick them up, but he seemed different somehow, more serious, less chatty during the drive to the ranch. After Maria had been working in the office for a few hours, Robert knocked on the door and asked if they could talk privately. "Is something wrong?" Maria asked, suddenly worried that he was going to tell her the job wasn't working out. "No, nothing's wrong," Robert said quickly. "It's just, yesterday at the hospital, when I said we were family, I meant it. You and the children have become the most important thing in my life." He sat down across from her, his hat in his hands. "I know it might seem fast, and I know you might not be ready for this conversation, but I need you to know how I feel. You've brought light back into my life, Maria. And those children, I love them like they were my own." Maria's heart was pounding. She had wondered if Robert felt the same way she did, but she had been afraid to hope for it. "I feel the same way," she said quietly, but I'm scared. I don't want to make a mistake that could hurt my children. They've been through so much already. I understand, Robert said. We don't have to rush anything. We can take all the time you need. But I wanted you to know that this isn't just a job for me anymore. You're not just my employee. You're the woman I love, and those children are the family I never thought I'd have. Maria looked out the window at her children who were feeding carrots to the horses and laughing at something Anna had said. They looked happy and secure in a way they hadn't since David died. I love you too, she said, the words feeling both scary and wonderful to say out loud. 1 year later, the smell of Sunday dinner filled every corner of the ranch house kitchen. Maria stood at the stove, stirring a pot of her grandmother's famous chicken and rice, while Robert mashed potatoes at the counter beside her. Through the window, she could see Anna teaching 3-year-old Rico how to pet the new foal that had been born last month, while Miguel and Isabella collected the evening eggs from the chicken coop. It was a scene of such ordinary happiness that sometimes Maria had to stop and remind herself that it was real, that this peaceful, abundant life belonged to her and her children, that the man humming softly beside her as he worked had become her husband and the father her children had needed. 3. Transformation hadn't happened overnight. After that emotional conversation in the ranch office, Maria and Robert had taken things slowly, mindful of the children's feelings and the memory of David. They had talked for hours about their hopes and fears, about how to blend their lives without erasing the past. The children had been surprisingly wise about the whole situation. Miguel had been the first to bring up the subject directly, asking his mother if she liked Mr. Robert in a grown-up way. When Maria blushed and nodded, Miguel had said seriously, "Good. Daddy would want you to be happy, and Mr. Robert makes you smile like you used to." Anna had worried more about whether accepting Robert as a stepfather meant forgetting David. But Robert had handled her concerns with perfect understanding, showing her the photo of his late wife that still sat on his dresser and explaining that loving new people didn't mean loving old people any less. "Your daddy will always be your daddy," he told Anna gently. "I'm not trying to take his place. I just want to love you and take care of you and your mama and your brothers and sister." Isabella, with the acceptance that came naturally to 7-year-old hearts, had simply asked when Mr. Robert was going to move in with them permanently, because she was tired of having to say goodbye every evening. They had married on a crisp spring morning in the small church where David's funeral had been held. It felt important to Maria to have their wedding in the same place where she had said goodbye to her first love, as if she were asking for David's blessing on this new chapter. Anna had walked down the aisle as maid of honor, carrying baby Rico, and beaming with pride. Miguel had served as Robert's best man, standing straight and serious in his first real suit. Isabella had been the flower girl, scattering rose petals with such enthusiasm that the entire congregation laughed with delight. The church had been full of people from the community who had watched this unlikely family come together. Mrs. Thompson, from the grocery store, had wept through the entire ceremony. The pastor had spoken about how love multiplies rather than divides, and how families come in many different forms. After the wedding, they had moved into the ranch house together. Maria had worried about how the children would adjust to leaving their apartment, but they had been excited about having their own rooms and a big backyard to explore. Robert had been patient and thoughtful about the transition. He let the children decorate their new rooms however they wanted. He helped them find places for all their treasures and kept David's photos prominently displayed throughout the house. He never asked them to call him Dad, but when Isabella started, doing it naturally about 6 months after the wedding, his eyes had filled with tears of joy. The ranch had flourished under their combined efforts. Maria's business skills and Robert's agricultural knowledge made them a formidable team. They had expanded the farm store, started offering horseback riding lessons for city children, and even begun hosting school groups who came to learn about farm life. Miguel had become something of a local celebrity for his chicken research. His detailed studies of egg production and chicken behavior had caught the attention of the Agricultural Extension Office, and he had presented his findings at a statewide youth science fair. At 13, he was already talking about studying veterinary science or agricultural research in college. Anna had grown into a confident young woman with her own business. She had started giving riding lessons to other children and her reputation for being able to work with difficult horses had spread throughout the county. Horse owners brought their problem animals to Anna, and she had a remarkable success rate in calming nervous horses and retraining aggressive ones. Robert had begun talking to Anna about the possibility of her taking over the ranch someday, if that was what she wanted. The idea that his beloved land could stay in the family, even if not his biological family, filled him with deep satisfaction. Isabella had become the ranch's official tour guide and storyteller. She could entertain visitors for hours with tales about the animals' personalities and adventures. Her cheerful nature and extensive knowledge made her popular with everyone who visited. Even little Rico had his role on the ranch. Now walking confidently and talking in complete sentences, he was everyone's helper and the ranch's official mood lifter. When Robert had a difficult day dealing with sick animals or broken equipment, Rico's giggles and enthusiastic hugs could turn everything around. The legal adoption had been finalized 6 months after the wedding. Robert had wanted to make sure the children would be financially secure and legally his responsibility if anything ever happened to him or Maria. The day the papers were signed, they had celebrated with a special dinner and a family portrait that now hung in the living room. But the real proof of their family bond wasn't in legal documents or formal ceremonies. It was in moments like Miguel running to Robert when he had scraped his knee, or Anna confiding her teenage worries to her stepfather, or Isabella automatically reaching for Robert's hand when they crossed the street in town. It was in the way. Robert had stayed up all night when Isabella had pneumonia, holding her while she slept and monitoring her fever. It was in how he had taught Miguel to drive the ranch truck and taken him to buy his first suit for the school dance. It was in the patient hours he spent helping Anna train a particularly difficult horse, never getting frustrated when progress was slow. This Sunday dinner was special because they were celebrating the first anniversary of Maria's recovery from the desperate situation that had brought them all together. The cardboard sign that had once read, "I'll work for food," now hung framed in Robert's office, not as a reminder of desperation, but as a testament to how courage in dark moments can lead to unexpected blessings. "Remember when we were so poor we only had peanut butter to eat?" Isabella said as they all sat down to the feast that covered the dining room table. "I remember," Maria said, looking around at her family's faces. "But more than that, I remember how you kids never complained even when things were really hard. We knew you were doing your best, Mama," Anna said, "and we knew Daddy would have wanted us to stick together." Robert cleared his throat and stood up, raising his glass of iced tea. "I'd like to make a toast," he said. "1 year ago I was a lonely old man rattling around this big house with nothing but memories for company. Then Maria had the courage to ask for help, and everything changed." He looked at each of the children in turn. "Miguel, you've taught me that science is everywhere, even in a chicken coop. Anna, you've shown me that some people are born knowing how to communicate with animals. Isabella, you remind me every day that joy is a choice we can make no matter what. Enrico, you've filled this house with laughter." Finally, he looked at Maria, his eyes soft with love. "And Maria, you've given me a family I never thought I'd have and a purpose I never expected to find. You've made me a better man and a happier one." He raised his glass higher. "To the Rodriguez-Johnson family. May we always remember that the best things in life often come disguised as ordinary Tuesday mornings when strangers decide to help each other." "To family," the children chorused, clinking their glasses together. As they began to eat, Maria looked around the table at the faces of her loved ones. David's photo smiled down at them from the mantelpiece, and she felt his approval and blessing on the life they had built. Sometimes the end of one story is really the beginning of another. Sometimes losing everything is the first step to finding something better than you ever imagined. Sometimes the answer to our prayers comes not in the form we expected, but in exactly the form we needed. The woman who had once stood at her kitchen table counting $17 and wondering how to feed her children was gone. In her place sat a confident businesswoman, a beloved wife, and a mother who had learned that accepting help wasn't a sign of weakness, but a recognition that we all need each other to thrive. Outside, the ranch stretched away in all directions, full of animals and growing things and endless possibilities. Inside, The house was full of love and laughter and the kind of contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. The sign in Robert's office no longer represented desperation. It represented hope, courage, and the beautiful truth that sometimes when we're brave enough to ask for help, we discover that what we really needed was each other all along. After dinner, as they all worked together to clean the kitchen, Isabella tugged on Robert's shirt. "Papa Robert," she said, using the name she had chosen for him, "are you glad that Mama was brave enough to make that sign?" Robert picked up his youngest daughter and hugged her tight.